30-second board time. Let's look at the hot topics in SMX right now. They don't get much hotter than Haiden Deegan, who even when he doesn't win, that still might have been his best race of the year, the incredible comebacks at High Point. And a 30-plus point lead this early in the season, that seems impossible that you could have that big a lead already.
Yeah, these pivotal moments in a series, and they may seem subtle at the time, but him going out and even though he didn't win the overall at High Point, him getting the points that he did, coming from the back the way he did, and going into, let's just say it, this is probably going to be the most challenging round of the series for him at Southwick with a 32-point lead, does so much for his comfort, his confidence, and I just think it proved that he's been the best rider unequivocally through the first 4 rounds. So it's been Haiden Deegan's series so far. We'll see what it looks like after his toughest race of the series, but I think it's impossible to say he hasn't been the guy thus far.
You say toughest race of the series. He's admitted, coming from Southern California, he's not a sand expert, but Monster Energy, Yamaha Star Racing rented Southwick out, I believe last Thursday, to try to get in as much time as possible. So that's going to help him a little bit. Or does that show to you like, oh man, they've really got to almost overcompensate for this track?
Well, I applaud the effort. If you don't make, real efforts to work on your weaknesses, then I would ask, what are you doing? So they know this is one of the most challenging tracks. It's a track that requires a different setting and setup for the riders than any other round. And it's also where Haiden Deegan really struggled last year, and he doesn't want to struggle as much as he did. Will it be the round where he goes out and dominates? Probably not. But if he can improve his positioning by a couple of spots, that will do so much for his championship hopes. So I always say you can look to see who wants to win the most by the effort behind the scenes. And I think that Monster Energy Star Yamaha, both by adding Max Anstie and getting Haiden Deegan some extra work in the sand, they're doing everything they can possibly do.
Yes, adding Max Anstie. Talk about this deal a little bit. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, we all saw how well he rode at times, and he had some really tough moments during Monster Energy Supercross too. But I think he's going back to a team that is a proven winner. And think about, he raced for this team in 2010. How long ago he was a part of this effort, and what that team looked like then and what it looks like now. Most of the paddock thinks that this is the most potent motorcycle on the racetrack. So for Max, it has to be an attractive landing spot. And he's going from a privateer effort where he was really, I think, overperforming necessarily what his motorcycle was capable of. And now he's going to arguably the best motorcycle on the racetrack. So you put Max Anstie in the sand on arguably the best bike. I don't know how this isn't set up perfectly for success.
And shout out to 2 things. A, Star, who can always find money in the couch cushions to start paying Anstie now. And they had to, because Anstie was supposed to race for Firepower Honda all the way through all the off-season Supercross and international events. It's an Australia-based team. He's the Australian Supercross champ. He gave up all that money by not racing in the fall. Star's paying him early to get that back. And then shout out to Yariv Konski, the team owner of that team, letting him go. Not going to get him to run a number 1 plate in Supercross internationally. So it's good to see them work it out, and this should be, to your point, pretty fun to see Anstie race Southwick, which might not have happened if the 2 teams hadn't been able to agree, and Max himself on a deal. But this is the way it goes sometimes. Look at Pro Circuit. No one thought Ty Masterpool would be the one winning the 300th ever event for that team. He wasn't even on the team when they won 299. Now, look, JT, I've been mocked. I've been teased by you and our buddy Steve Mathis over how good I think Masterpool can be. I've already proven myself, bro. I've already proven myself. He's won. We got to look at the other guys on the team. Here is the list of injured riders: Voland, Hammaker, McAdoo, Faulkner. I got another question for you. What happened to Levi Kitchen? We left round 1 thinking he was right there with Deegan. He's almost 50 points behind. What's going on here?
Well, think about how long we had been talking about this 299th win going into 300, and it was almost a foregone conclusion that it would be Levi Kitchen who got this job done. And why wouldn't we think that? As well as he was riding coming out of Monster Energy Supercross, where he didn't get it done, let's be real, but also how well he rode at the opener. It was almost like, yeah, this is just a matter of time. But here comes Ty Masterpool, and I'm not giving it to you. You used the word championship, and he's 75 points down after 4 rounds. But to your point, he is riding exceptionally well, and he's gotten better and better. We saw how difficult it is to transition to a new motorcycle, a new team right off the bat. Big crashes, didn't really end up where he wanted to be. But a few weeks later, some testing, getting comfortable, now he's a real contender. So I expect him to see him in the top 5 the rest of the way. But this is just an incredible moment. His first win, the 300th win for Mitch Payton. I felt, the way I talked about earlier with Haiden Deegan being such a pivotal round, and you really didn't think about it so much at High Point, I think it was the opposite for Tom Vialle at High Point, struggling because he was in the lead in that first moto. You think about what that could have done, swinging the momentum his way going into a track where I think all of us are looking at him having his best chance to win. He goes 1-3 there last year. He gets the overall, and I think this was really the arrival onto the scene for Tom Vialle. The problem is he's so many points down in the championship now. He could go in and dominate Southwick, and it's still not be enough to really be taken seriously against Haiden Deegan. So we have a lot of racing left. There are rounds where he does ride very well, but I just thought it was such a difficult setup leaving High Point, now going into his best round, and you're still hoping he climbs back into the championship, but he let so many points slip away.
So many points that he's not even second in the championship. We mentioned Levi Kitchen dropping back as well. Chance Hymas, who was nowhere in Supercross, no podiums, showed a little bit of speed here and there, is now second in the 250 Pro Motocross standings. And with that, he's rocketed up the SMX standings as well. But what is the data on him and Sand and Southwick? What do you think we have here for Hymas? Can he keep this going?
I think he'll be okay. It's not his natural terrain. Like, he grew up in southern Idaho. It's pretty hard packed, but he's been in Florida for 2 years now. He's ridden with Jet and Hunter and these guys. I'm sure that he's learned a lot. They've been out riding at Croom Motorcycle Park, which is about as sandy as you'll ever get. So is it the best setup for him? Maybe not, but I think he'll be just fine. And not every round has to be your best one. I thought High Point set up really nicely for him.
Well, I guess you're right about something, JT. Your top thought at the beginning of this show is how close the points were. Here it is. It's on the graphic. So let's talk about this three-way battle. And yes, I do believe it's a little different because if you're Chase Sexton, true or not true, I'm sure in his head he's saying High Point was mine. I had it. I should have won. Could have won. So both mathematically, he and Hunter Lawrence are ahead of Jet. But I've got to think at least confidence-wise, Chase is there. But I don't think Southwick is Chase's best track. What do you think about him and Hunter against Jet this weekend?
Well, I think perspective goes a long way because you could look at it in a positive light. And if you asked Chase Sexton through 4 rounds, under any circumstances, would you take being ahead of Jet Lawrence in the points? And I think he would say, absolutely. I don't care what other detail you throw at me, I'll take it. But if you look at the opportunity that he's left on the table at both Thunder Valley, where Jet was not 100%, and Chase had a very poor day, and then at High Point, where Jet's kind of laboring, and Chase again throws away the lead in the second moto. You could look at it that way, right? And it's all about perspective. But I think in the end, you have to block out the mistakes. You have to block out everything else and say, hey, if you want a chance to win this championship, there's been 4 rounds. Hunter's ahead of you, sure, 6 points, not a big deal, but you're ahead of Jet. And you couldn't say that at any point in this championship in 2023. So agree with you that this is not the best round for him. But I think for the confidence level of these riders, it's all about finding silver linings. It's all about waking up every morning and saying, okay, what's the good in today? How do I build upon today? Because negative thoughts, if you allow them to creep in, can really be pervasive. And I think for Chase especially, he's been a victim of that in the past where he's allowed these problems to kind of multiply. So I think this weekend's a big one. If he can just maybe split points with Jet, I think that would be a huge win. Forget about the red plate for now. And then you go into Redbud, which is a great race for him.
I don't have silver linings here. I'm a realist, JT. I think this particular track, the gap between Jet and the competition grows. He spent a lot of time, more time really in his younger years, growing up in sand than even Hunter. Because when they moved to Europe, he was even younger. I feel like Jet's skill set and his riding style, standing up, is a little more of a sand guy than even Hunter is. So I feel like they got to write off this weekend. If Jet puts it to them, they got to say, well, that was just Southwick. But you're saying you think Hunter actually, don't be surprised at Southwick for him.
Well, on the other hand, yes, I think it is going to be a tough day for Chase. And I do think that Hunter and Jet are better in these conditions. And you look at the history of their riding, how much time they've spent in the sand, racing over in Europe in these conditions, what their skill set is really suited for. They should have a phenomenal day. This is the site of Hunter Lawrence's first ever win. Back in 2021, he went 1-1 on the day, which was kind of out of nowhere. That was not an expected result, and everybody had to kind of take a step back and go, hey, this kid might be for real. And then you fast forward three years and we know he is. But then also for Jet, I think he really flows in this type of track, and they know this, right? Chase knows this isn't the best track for him. Jet and Hunter know that this is a great track for them, and that really starts to work against them or for them. So yes, as much as I want to say that's okay day for Chase and maybe he can find a way, you look at Jet riding at Croom with Chance Hymas and Hunter preparing just in the deep sands that have these really produced guys like Kenny Keelan going back to the 70s and 80s. It's a track that Ricky Carmichael grew up riding. RJ Hampshire grew up about 15 minutes from there. These are the hallowed grounds that sand riders are produced from. And guess what? That's where Jet and Hunter have been for the past 2 weeks, just hammering motos.
That's so funny. Yeah, Croom, that's not even a racetrack, right? That's just I rode there once. You probably rode there 1 million times. It's just a riding spot.
Yep. It's just an off-road torture park. It absolutely will beat you into submission. But guess what? When you show up on race day, you're that much better for it.
Let's look at the SMX playoff schedule here. We want to remind, yes, you're right. If you make one big mistake in these, you're not going to be able to make up for it. It's 3 races for the big money and the pride of being the SMX World Champion. That will start September 7th, ZMAX Dragway in Concord, North Carolina. Texas Motor Speedway, that's a new venue for us. We racing there. And then the strip at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, that's a drag strip, a 4-wide one like the one we saw in Charlotte. But they have a little more room actually to work with even beyond. So it'll be really interesting how those track layouts turn out. It was funny. I was actually reading a story by Dan Beaver of NBC Sports. He was talking to Dave Prater from FIM Motorsports, and Prater said, we hope to still be able to surprise the riders like we did last year, because boy, were they out of sorts when we got to those hybrid tracks. They were not ready, but it kind of led to entertaining and unpredictable results. One thing that is predictable, though, we want to give a shout out to this guy, the veteran out of Sweden, Freddie Noren. When you get outdoors, just pencil in top 10 finishes every week and look at what it has done, JT. He's gone from outside the top 20 in combined SMX points. He's already up to 14th now.
Yeah, these subtle differences that the SMX playoff, this has created all of this. And you see me there interviewing Freddie. He had just won the FMF Privateer Power Award, but he is a force outdoors. And the difference between his ability in Monster Energy Supercross and then here in Pro Motocross is stark. And I think the key there, the point of that, is think about what if he wasn't so good at Pro Motocross and he had to ride the LCQ every single weekend for the playoff rounds. He's not going to have to. He's going to be seated in. The amount of money that's going to garner him, the amount of stress that's going to take off of his shoulders, and he's earning it every step of the way, every moto he goes out there. But it just shows you these two different disciplines, how different the skill sets are, but how much they have come together to create this one championship. You don't have to be incredibly good if you're really good at the other, and Freddie Noren is the poster boy for that.
Yeah, well, no stress for Freddie Noren in motocross. He's good in all conditions, but there was some stress over the conditions for the folks that operate the WIC 338 over the weekend, man.
Yeah, and you think about all the track prep that has to go on. They're a week out, and they have to deal with this monsoon, right? There's literally a river running through the Southwick racetrack. This is a week ahead of the event, and thankfully the weather has subsided a bit. But you think about all the prep and all the work that had been done before this that's now out the window. They're going to have this dialed. These guys are professionals, but yes, to your point, the stress that this probably caused and the extra work is amazing. Now, what it means for the riders, it's going to be a different type of racetrack. All of this rain packs that sand in. So you're thinking about the fluffy, rolling bumps of Southwick. That's not what this is going to be. It's going to be a faster, harder Southwick, a choppier Southwick, which means the riders will have to adjust their motorcycle settings exactly for that.
And there will be a few riders that are familiar with anything that Southwick can throw at them. That is the legend of this race. The locals coming out, often leading laps, battling for podiums. We don't know who will come out of the woodwork necessarily to do that this year, but one story we're definitely tracking, Tony LaRusso, who you used to race, JT, but he was a veteran even when you were racing him. He's 52 and he's going to try to race and qualify.
Yeah, it's amazing. I remember riding with him in Florida when I was 15 years old. I also remember him leading the Southwick National for 25 minutes in 1996. So in true Southwick fashion, you think about the races that Doug Henry and John Dowd have had way past the primes of their career. It's going to be very hard for everybody to not be cheering on Tony LaRusso as he's getting out there. And let's hope he qualifies. We all know that little secret about the qualifying sessions at Southwick, getting out there on the smooth racetrack. But what a story that would be if Tony LaRusso can qualify for these motos.
Yeah, he'll race at 250. He'll be in the very first practice on Saturday morning when the track should be totally smooth and at its fastest. He definitely doesn't need to go slow for a lap to learn the layout of the racetrack. He can pin it right off the bat. That'd be unbelievable. Tony hasn't raced the Southwick National since 2012, but he races all the time, amateur stuff, local stuff. So we'll see how he does. And that would just be another piece of the local lore at the Wick. How you folks can see it. We'll have race day live coverage presented by motorsport.com at 10 a.m. Eastern this Saturday. That's qualifying, a 1-hour show. And the motos start at 1 o'clock Eastern. We'll have 4 straight hours of live moto coverage and a halftime show in between and a post-race show. So dial us in. It'll be Peacock or the SMX Video Pass outside the United States.
Hi folks, Lee Diffie from NBC Sports here. If you truly enjoyed what you just watched, you can get more news, interviews, and highlights by subscribing to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube page. You can get it all, so go for it.